The envelope landed on the polished conference table with a sound far louder than paper should ever make. For 5 years, Daniel Carter had walked through the same glass doors, carried the same worn leather briefcase, and stood quietly beside the most powerful woman in the company. But that morning, he placed his resignation letter in front of his CEO, turned around, and prepared to walk away from the only career he had left. He thought he was leaving behind a job. He never imagined he was about to leave behind the person who had quietly become the one person who understood how tired he really was. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one small act can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Beyond Dreams Stories for more emotional stories like this one. Daniel had never expected his life to become difficult so early. At 32, he was raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. Her mother had left years earlier, saying she wasn't ready for the responsibility of being a parent. Daniel never spoke badly about her. He simply learned how to become both father and mother to a little girl who still believed her dad could fix anything. He couldn't fix everything. He couldn't fix the overdue rent notices that sometimes arrived before his paycheck. He couldn't make the old apartment warmer during winter. He couldn't explain why he sometimes pretended he wasn't hungry so Lily could have the last piece of chicken. And he certainly couldn't explain why he was always exhausted. But he could show up. Every morning, Daniel prepared Lily's breakfast, fixed her school uniform, packed her lunch, and walked her to the bus stop before taking the train downtown. At the office, he worked as executive operations manager for Victoria Hayes, the company's brilliant and intimidating CEO. Victoria was known for being demanding. Employees called her cold behind closed doors. Investors admired her discipline. Competitors feared her decisions. Daniel knew something different. He knew she noticed things. She noticed when he arrived with dark circles beneath his eyes. She noticed when his phone kept lighting up during meetings because Lily's school was calling. She noticed that every year Daniel refused a promotion that required frequent travel. What she didn't know was why. Then, one rainy Tuesday, Daniel's world began falling apart. Lily developed a serious fever at school. Daniel left the office in the middle of an important meeting and rushed across the city. He spent the night sitting beside her bed, holding a damp cloth to her forehead while silently calculating how many sick days he had left. By morning, he knew the truth. He couldn't keep living like this. The next week, Daniel found a smaller job closer to home. The salary was lower, but the hours were predictable. He would be able to pick Lily up from school every afternoon. He would be home for dinner. He would finally be there when she needed him. So he wrote his resignation letter. For 5 years, Daniel had been the person who solved problems nobody else wanted to touch. He had protected Victoria's schedule, managed crises, stayed late, and quietly cleaned up mistakes made by executives earning several times his salary. He never complained. Until that morning. Victoria stared at the letter for a long time. Daniel stood across the table, expecting anger, disappointment, or perhaps a simple acceptance. Instead, Victoria looked toward the window. Outside, the city stretched beneath a gray sky. Then she asked him why. Daniel hesitated before telling her the truth. He explained about Lily, the long hours, the rent, the constant fear of failing his daughter, and the new job that would pay less but give him something money couldn't buy, time. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, Daniel picked up his briefcase. He thanked her for everything and headed toward the door. Then Victoria said something that stopped him cold. "Can I come with you?" Daniel slowly turned around. For the first time in 5 years, Victoria Hayes didn't look like a CEO. She looked lost. Daniel didn't understand. Victoria explained that she wasn't asking to follow him literally. She was asking if she could come to the place where his life was going next. She admitted that during the 5 years they had worked together, she had watched him sacrifice everything for his daughter. And somewhere along the way, she had realized something painful about herself. She had built a company worth millions, but she had forgotten how to live outside it. Her own father had raised her to believe that success meant never needing anyone. When he died, Victoria inherited his company and spent years trying to prove she deserved it. She worked late, cancelled holidays, missed family occasions, and slowly convinced herself that loneliness was simply the price of achievement. Daniel's resignation forced her to question everything. Then Victoria did something Daniel never expected. She offered him a position that had never existed before, Director of Community Operations, working remotely most of the week, with flexible hours and enough salary to keep his family secure. Daniel stared at her, suspicious. He didn't want charity. Victoria understood immediately. She told him it wasn't charity. She had spent 5 years watching him save the company countless times without asking for recognition. She was finally giving him something he had earned. Daniel accepted, but only after making one condition. His daughter came first. Victoria smiled and agreed. A few weeks later, something remarkable happened. Daniel stopped rushing through life. He picked Lily up from school. He attended her little art exhibition. He cooked dinner without checking his watch every 30 seconds. On weekends, he took her to the park and listened to stories about school that he once would have missed. And Victoria began changing too. She started leaving the office before sunset. She visited community centers supported by the company. She met families who reminded her that success wasn't measured by the size of an office or the number of zeros in a bank account. One Saturday afternoon, Victoria showed up at Daniel's apartment carrying a small box. Inside was Lily's favorite chocolate cake. Lily ran toward her with a smile. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching. He suddenly understood what Victoria had meant that day. She hadn't been asking to follow him. She had been asking for a second chance at life. Months later, Daniel looked back at the resignation letter that had started everything. The paper was still in his desk drawer. It had once represented the end of his career. Now it represented the beginning of something much more important. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it is the bravest way of choosing what truly matters. And sometimes the person who looks like they have everything is quietly waiting for someone to remind them that life is about more than success. Just before we end, tell us in the comments, if you were Daniel, would you have accepted Victoria's second chance? Write, everyone deserves a second chance, if you believe kindness can change a person's life. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Beyond Dream Stories. Because sometimes, the greatest turning points in life begin with something as simple as a resignation letter, and one person brave enough to ask, "Can I come with you?"